Hello, everybody, and welcome back to this week's episode of the BeDifferential Podcast. I'm your host, Ava Gregory, and this week we are joined by the CEO of Pikes Peak International Hill Climb, Melissa Eickhoff. Welcome to this episode.
Thank you for having me. I'm really looking forward to our discussion.
I very much am too. So before we dive in, why don't you give the listener just high level who you are?
Sure. I joined the hill climb about 2.5 years ago. I had been working in IndyCar. Before that, I was Yokohama. I worked in IMSA, worked with lots of different small race series. But here it's been a lot of fun being CEO and helping bring a lot of what I've learned over those years in many different variety of positions. Bring it all to the table here at the hill climb and watch it in action. Unique event. I love it. I'm very passionate about Colorado Springs and the Pikes Peak region. So a lot of my passions came together for me to get here, and I'm loving every minute of it.
That's fantastic. And I love what you've said already about having experience in multiple different series. I feel like that's very common if you're in the motorsport industry, that once you're in it, you can't leave it. You might just stay and try a few different things. But tell us, what led you to actually joining and taking on this current role that you have with the International Hill Climb?
Sure. It started, was the first time I came to Pikes Peak. Naturally, I think like a lot of people in motorsports or racers, going to these kinds of one-off events like Pikes Peak or Le Mans or the Baja 1000 or any 24-hour race, right? You kind of have that's your bucket list. Maybe, people think about it for racers, but I think as motorsport professionals, we have that same bucket list. And Pikes Peak was there. And I got to do it as a sponsor with Yokohama Tire. And I fell in love with it. I kind of really saw it from the sponsor side of things. I got to know people here. I've always been a big fan of Colorado and this area, and stayed close with the then executive director. And over time, things changed, this place changed, and she moved over to another position, and I was one of her calls and said, hey, would you like to come work here? And I said, hell yeah. It was just, like I said, it's a culmination of all my passions, and one of those things is leadership. And I hadn't been in a great place to exercise that passion for a long time. So I knew that was like first and foremost something I wanted to do, and bring all the, like I said, it feels random. My resume looks random, but it isn't, right? All that experience, all those things from changing toilet paper to porta potty to actually racing is relevant here. So, and I've done a lot of things in between or seen it or been around and exposed.
Gosh, I unfortunately resonate so closely with porta potty incidences and my time at Road Atlanta, and I will never forget. But you're so right. It helps in so many ways toward developing leadership, and I love the passion and excitement you have for what you do. But I do want to talk about maybe some of the challenges that you had to work through. I love that you had the opportunity to just be asked, hey, is this something you're interested in? Can you speak to maybe your adjustment and joining and maybe that initial section of time of when you became a part of the Pikes Peak team?
Yeah, I think some of the challenges, I think in general with getting into motorsport and moving into a position like this is being seen, being heard, and getting credit. And those are three key elements. And to getting into a position like CEO or any position of leadership is you need to make sure those things are happening for you.
Yeah.
And then so I think one of those first, moments when that happened here for me, with the staff, or I report to the board, or in the community, or, the interviews when, the race is happening. It's those moments that really brought it all together and made it felt like, okay, I can own this, I can do this, because it was all those elements, it was all those people being involved, being seen, being heard, and getting credit. That matters, whether it's credit for the group or for myself or any level of that. So that all really came together here. The community, honestly, one of the most fun things about it is the support for women in leadership here. It's amazing. We get together quarterly. CEOs and leaders across community, nonprofits, and for-profit entities get together and just have each other's back. And they had mine. And when you meet people, who's going to be there when you need them. And I just can't say enough about the community like that they really welcomed me. And it all really came together in that first race.
That's huge. What maybe for some more women that are in these spaces that are coming into leadership roles, what might be a piece of advice you have for curating that network of women supporters? I mean, I never want to discount having male allies and mentors, but I do think it's important to have women that are in your corner as well. So what is maybe a piece of advice you have for those that are coming into new leadership roles to build and find that community?
Well, it's funny. You need to define what your cohort and what your community is, right? So I think that's important. People can network, but if you're not networking with the right people in the right places that meet your goals, then, maybe it's not going to go as far as fast as you want it to. So I think that's a very important piece, is to define those cohorts and those people and have the conversations with men and women. I just talk and I would listen to their stories, because as many people as there are in motorsport, there is that many different entry points and different experiences as getting into it. So you just have the conversations. Don't just meet people. Don't just shake hands. Listen to how they did it, and you'll find your path. I think, and that's what I did. I just listened so much. I don't know. Somehow I didn't talk a lot. I held back. No, I just had some really amazing people in my life early in my career. And honestly, most of them were men, a few women, but those few women made a huge difference to me.
That's huge. I resonate so much with what you just said, because I do think on this podcast, I emphasize, and the guests often emphasize, the power of networking. But wow, the importance of identifying what your cohort is, identifying what your goals are, and making sure that you're in the right network to be engaging with. I think that is really important, because I think it can be easily misconstrued that I just need to shake hands with everyone. And sometimes it sounds bad, but there isn't always benefit to that.
Yeah.
Not that it's transactional, but that is really, really important. So I have to ask, you said that Pikes Peak was one of your bucket list items, and it is such an iconic and historic event. I mean, globally. What does it mean to you coming into this role and now being a part of this iconic race?
It didn't fully hit me probably till after my first race. That I have a historian on staff. I mean, that's how important, our history and our legacy is here. So that's an unusual move for any race, right? To have an actual historian. But then I realized that I'm going to be a part of what she's documenting. It's like, oh, wait a minute. People are tracking. There's going to be an era. There's going to be a time, and the big changes and the things that are happening, it's going to be documented and watched and criticized maybe at times. But, you can take all that. But it means everything. I take it very seriously. I'm a big historian, like kind of a nerdy historian. So I get into all of it. I love hearing all the stories. I love learning about the generations of people that have served this race, whether they're volunteers or paid or whatever it might be, or spectators generationally. They've been coming up here for, 4 generations. This is crazy. So it's a very important legacy to protect and make sure I set it up and keep it as stable as possible for it to continue for another 100 years.
Yeah, that's huge. I mean, besides being historic, this race is known as the race to the clouds, right? So I think it doesn't compare to any other motorsport event. It is so unique in itself. But what do you think makes it so different beyond its history? What do you think really draws the crowd and participants to be a part of it?
I really think it's community. And community is defined in a few different ways. One, it's, the literal community of Colorado Springs and the Pikes Peak region. We couldn't do it without hundreds of volunteers and, like I said, those generational support over the years. And the community, from civic leadership and all that. But it's also that we've worked hard and built a culture of community within the competitor in the paddock, if you will. We don't even get to have a paddock, by the way. That's just one of those fun little facts. But the challenge of the mountain is so much that that's the number one priority for all of the competitors. So they make sure, and they want to make sure every one of their competitors gets up the mountain. And the lengths that they go to help each other is unrivaled. They talk about that's really what brings so many of them back. And every year there's a new challenge that they have. It might be, yes, they get up the course, beat the weather. Sometimes we shorten the course because of weather, so they have to come back and do it again. But it's always funny. It's like it's a bucket list, but then they keep coming back because they're still finding new challenges within themselves or on the mountain that they have to conquer.
That's, I mean, so true. I love that you say, like, it's something that they've achieved or they've conquered and they keep coming back to it. And from like my background being on the operational side of a racetrack, I am so fascinated by the logistics that goes into weather, altitude. There's so many constantly changing conditions on Pikes Peak during this race, during this competition, that makes it truly challenging. What are some of the biggest logistical challenges that you and your team have to navigate to ensure the safety and success of this event?
It's a long list, and I think it kind of, but that's honestly what I love about it. But I'll just start with the fact that we're on U.S. Forest Service grounds. The highway is managed by the City of Colorado Springs, so we're working with those two entities. We use property that's owned by Colorado Springs Utilities, so that's another government entity. The race course or highway itself crosses in zigzags along two counties, so Teller and El Paso County. So I'm working with two counties, sheriff's departments, et cetera, plus a state highway feeds into it. So I'm working with the state, PD on that, and state and city. So it's so many different government agencies that I have to work with to make this happen. And I'll say they're all very much dedicated to making it happen, because Pikes Peak is managed like nothing else in the U.S. Forest Service system. So that has its own fun challenges, but everybody does work hard, and they do want to also protect the legacy and history of this race. And then on top of that, we're working around tourist traffic. So part of that U.S. Forest Service piece is access to Pikes Peak and to those grounds. It's public ground, right? Mm-hmm. So we are very limited on the hours and how we set up. So we set up at a trickle. We are just little bits and pieces, a couple porta potties a day, I get back to this porta potty thing, up and down the mountain. It takes about a good month or so to get the setup done. We tear down in 4 days, but that's normal operation, interesting math. But it takes us a month, and we do it in and around tourist traffic. Mm-hmm. So, we have to be really cognizant of that. And then when it comes time for competition in the month of June, early mornings, we're on and off the mountain before the tourists really get up there. So that's why those famous, 5:15 sunrises from the top of Pikes Peak happen with the competitors, because when we're practicing, we have to be off the mountain by 9 a.m. So that, they don't get to practice race conditions, so that's the challenge. And we only practice in pieces, so like each section. So they never actually put the whole course together until race day. So they get one run and done.
That is so fascinating to me. And I feel like for a competitor, so challenging. Coming from the Road Atlanta background, there is similarly multiple months leading into an event like Motul Petit Le Mans. But to the competitor's perspective, they have all week, they have qualifying, they have practices, and it's the whole course. I really hadn't considered the tourist factor and needing to maneuver around that. Wow, that's so interesting. So speaking of people that are attracted to the space, this race does attract a mix of all kinds of racers, from top-level professionals to grassroots interested racers, and even international competitors as well. How do you think that Pikes Peak is continuing to grow its reach while maintaining and giving homage to its origin and its rich history?
So I think it's always going to be that challenge. We're a unique mountain, we've got this road that's paved, and so we're going to continue to be a proving ground for technology. So we get that draw of the manufacturers and the marketing programs and the big budgets. But then we balance it with our grassroots racers, that have built these the Pikes Peak specials, right? There's a lot of different varieties of those, and we love those. And there's lots, and they do really well. They have a good showing because they've become such specialists here. And we balance that. I think it's always going to be that place. The stories, the challenges, the storytelling is it's always going to be there, and it's a beautiful backdrop. So I don't think that's ever going to change. I think it's up to the organization to kind of make sure that we're keeping up enough and, allow enough divisions to get that variety. My favorite thing is to see, some special built vehicle go up one day, and then later in the race we'll see somebody's garage built car go up and podium right alongside them. It happens, and that's the best part. And then also just some of the unique builds that come up here too. I think variety is so important for this race too, and we maintain that, and that's why it's invitational, right? So we get to decide each year what this is going to look like. It's not first come, first serve. And we have a variety of divisions. We have a rule book that's purposely written loosely other than safety concerns, but otherwise it's written pretty loose to allow for a variety of vehicles. And that's been the case since the beginning, and I think times have evolved. There were times when there were a lot more stock cars and Indy cars coming up here, but we keep moving. But we've always had open wheel. We plan to always have open wheel because that's been here from day one.
And it is so cool. And you're right. I mean, there's so much regulation in so many other series and competitions that it is hard to see a really wide variety. And I love that you mentioned like the unique builds. We previously had a guest on the podcast that was Silas Montgomery, and that was the most wild story to hear about the process and the build and how many different types of cars brought components to the ultimate build.
Yeah.
So I love that. And it is such a cool way to maintain, to your point, the history of open wheel car, but bringing ingenuity and giving space to let people still be creative in such a regulated motorsport industry. So that's so fascinating.
Right. And I loved his car. I saw that you did that podcast. I was like, oh, yes, we all love that. I mean, his wing was as big as the body. I mean, it was ridiculous. I loved it.
Yeah, it really was. And I candidly didn't really know about it. So I'm so glad that we were able to do a little deeper dive into it. But so let's talk a little bit more. I think you already alluded to some of the things that fans might not necessarily realize goes into the logistics. But what are some more of the behind the scenes aspects of Pikes Peak? This could be, the setup, the teardown. It could be during the race. It could be things that you're considering. I think that is something for listeners. This is really intriguing to kind of get that behind the scenes access.
Sure. I think first I'll always say that if a team or competitor's coming up, I really strongly suggest that they come and scout it out in advance, because they're like, okay, we'll bring our truck and trailer up. I'm like, no, we don't have that much room up here. So, there's a lot, it's space. It's really about space. And we're always under pressure to protect the natural resources and work in partnership with the Forest Service. We're in a day and age where there's more and more attention put towards that. So we have to be very good stewards. So we don't want to be the fun police, but at times we've had to make changes over the last couple of years to make sure we're finding that balance, because it is a moving target. What worked 50 years ago doesn't work now. And so the tickets it's not based on how many people and how much space. It's about parking. How many parking spots do we have? And very, very limited. So, as we roll out new programs and new things, those pressures are really what, are bringing that to the forefront. And I find that change is hard for a lot of people. And so we've made quite a few changes, but really it's been about making sure we can keep the spectator experience to the level that it has been. And it's only, those pressures, it's a balancing act for sure. But we keep trying to do and find new ways to keep this race alive under those pressures. Some of the fun, like it's talked about the early morning practices and how that all works and the one run, just the schedule and cadence of it all is amazing. I like it. Somehow I figure out how to get into a rhythm of waking up at 2 a.m. to get to the mountain by 5, and I'm a late arrival. They're up there at 2:30.
Guys.
But just the number of people and the partners, like we work with the city of Colorado Springs. It's Pikes Peak America's Mountain is who manages, that highway. And they're just as involved. And the maintenance guys, I have to give them a shout out. They are just as dedicated to keeping that road clear and clean and people safe as we are, and they're an extension of us, for the month of June. So I just think people understanding like I said, we don't want to be the fun place. We want to keep this going, but we have to, keep that balance and keep all the different entities, happy. And then just also trying to get the word out about the live stream is really becoming a better way, or one of the best ways to watch the race. I mean, there's nothing like experiencing it, right? I should add, this is the one night of the year, the night before, Saturday night before the race is the one night of the year you're allowed to camp on the mountain. So Yeah, so we sell about 275 overnight camping passes, and that's it for the rest of the year. So that's a pretty special piece too that we get to do. Um, so all of that, and just also trying to get the live stream out as a new way, new and better each year. We've taken that production in house for the first time, and so that's been a learning curve. But I think to the benefit, we get to push the stories and focus on what we want to focus on. And I think that's getting better and better each year.
Yeah, I mean, you highlighted so many important points, and I want to emphasize a few of them because you're so right. Navigating, to your point earlier, you mentioned people have been coming for decades, have been seeing it, and so any bit of change is really challenging, and it is scary sometimes when they have been coming for 40 years. And so I love that you emphasize, finding the balance. You still want to keep the fans happy, but there is a potential of limited space and the sustainability efforts that are such a hot topic in our industry right now. And if we want to keep seeing events that we love, then we have to be conscious of that sustainability. And also, I appreciate the shout out to the maintenance teams because they are the unsung heroes across motorsports. I mean, that is, and especially just from a road service perspective, but yeah, that is huge. So obviously, of course, has everything from dramatic moments, record-breaking runs, iconic builds. What is maybe a very memorable moment for you that has been rewarding in your time with Pikes Peak?
I think I am privileged to go do the last run with the race director at the end of the race. And we're both ecstatic and we're both emotional, so it can be very quiet because we're just taking it all in. And as we go up to the summit doing that final clearance, we're seeing the drivers on the side of the road that maybe didn't make it all the way. We're taking in the fans and everything else, and then we get to the summit and we see the celebration of all the drivers and what's happening at the top. And it moves me just talking about it. It's amazing. I feel, like everybody's safe. They've made it there. That I finally can breathe a little bit. We're going to come down. And then at the end of the race, I jump in the first car on the way down for the Parade of Champions. And we lead all the vehicles down the mountain. And the spectators line and cheer and wave. And that end of the race moment is probably, it's amazing. I look forward to it. But it's a relief and it's joyful. It's emotional because you care about all these people. You care about all the safety team. You see all the officials along the side of the course, and we're all celebrating together. And so that's a very special moment. It's very unique because, really it's just the race director and I that get to go through that. So that's super special.
I think that's such a beautiful image of capturing the duality of motorsport, right? And the ascent of going up the mountain and you're literally seeing the trail of those that may not have made it. I mean, wow. And then you get there and there's this celebration. I can only imagine the emotional experience that is and how accepting silence in that could be really important. So I appreciate you sharing that. Looking ahead, I think that Pikes Peak has such a rich history and it's going to continue for so long. Where do you see Pikes Peak evolving in the next couple of years?
I think it's more organizational. I think, competition-wise, we have a long history of balancing, trends in motorsport with, for instance, adding GT4, right? That's a great access point to come race at Pikes Peak. But I think that we already do a really good job, and so I think we'll continue to do that. Organizationally, we're in a really good spot, but just trying to, get as much stability built into this organization. There was so much instability with the paving of the road. It went from dirt to paving, and it took 10 years, and it was a dotted line. And so the organization really suffered, and it's taken a long time to get to this point. So I think we've been building, and we're getting something very stable in the works, and we keep adding components organizationally. And I will say one of the legacies I want to leave behind is going to be a culture that embraces change, that enables them to be ready for whatever might come, whatever's going to get thrown at you, because in events or in motorsport or whatever it might be, something's coming. And so you just make sure you have everything you can and can plan for ready to go, so you're ready for whatever that thing is going to be. So I've just been trying to really build that culture to be able to embrace, change, whether it's big or small, for the benefit of the organization.
That is too relatable. I mean, every single motorsport event, something happens that was unplanned. So you had mentioned at the beginning of this episode your passion behind leadership as well. What processes, how do you think you will help to create and prepare the team, the whole Pikes Peak organization for those unexpected scenarios?
Well, I think it's definitely like teamwork. I think, as a leader, the best thing I can do is have their back. And I think, and stand up for what the organization and stand true to who we are and make the decisions and stand with them. It's a history and things get to where they are, but, I came in from a strong motorsport background where the rules are the rules. And here it might have been a little bit more, this is Pikes Peak, it's okay for now, but that leads to other issues. So, and it wasn't much, but, just making sure I have their back as their leader and provide professional development, provide the tools that they need, and make sure that they can come to me or any of the other leaders in the organization to do that. And I think we've definitely been building on that in the last couple of years and feel really good about where we're at.
Yeah, that's huge. I love that so much. You mentioned just a moment ago as well, you want to be an organization that looks toward and welcomes change and is willing to accept things as they come rather than how they've been. I think a hot topic that everyone entering motorsport or has an interest in motorsport is always curious about its access points and its entry points. What are ways that people can get involved if they're more interested in maybe starting to participate in Pikes Peak or even come out and viewing? Just what processes can they go through and how is Pikes Peak working to create more accessibility?
Really good question. We're a very small organization year round. And so it's accessible. It's a mountain, which is always its own, own hurdle, what that we can't control, I guess. But for drivers, I think, just scouting it out. The GT4 division is great because it lets them focus more on the mountain and learning about the race as opposed to their car and how the car is going to react. So then I think that's a great entry point for drivers and teams. I think we have a really great network of veteran drivers that work with our rookie drivers. They're not rookies in the sport, right? But rookie drivers, we just have a great network of people to rely upon. Opportunities to volunteer. We have officials. We have so many officials because it's 12 and a half miles and 156 turns. So we have a lot of officials out there keeping track of everybody. We have a great safety team that we build each year. There's a lot of different entry points, just like in motorsport. I always like to say, you can think of your career. What did you want to do? Don't think of motorsport. You think the nurse. I want to be a firefighter. I want to be a PR person. Well, you can find it in motorsport, right? We use all of those different skills and talents across the board, and we have lots of other volunteers that help with the pop-up events. We have a fan fest. We put on a big festival for all the fans and close down 10 blocks in Colorado Springs and put on a big show. So there's lots of opportunities and access and great internships. I think what's unique is it's very intense. That month of June is so intense here that interns learn about every piece of this race really quick. We're not well served with longer term internships necessarily for a lot, but that month of June, I think they get a lot out of it.
I love that. You're so right. There's so many aspects that are just trial by fire too, that it completely makes sense. And I probably should have asked this at the beginning, but I'm just assuming that every listener knows what this is. But Melissa, can you give an overview from Pikes Peak International Hill Climb from like day one? What could someone as a viewer or a fan or spectator expect to experience?
So I'll go way back to the beginning. 1916, Spencer Penrose started this race as a way to promote tourism in the community of Colorado Springs, in particular to promote the hotel he was going to open in 1918, which was the Broadmoor, which is, high-class hotel, beautiful place. And it's continued since then in a lot of different ways and different forms over the years. But it's 12.42 miles. It starts at 9390 and ends at 14,115 feet. And like I said, 156 turns. So it's a challenge, and those turns and no guardrails. The guardrails that are there are meant for tourists to catch traffic going down the mountain, not up the mountain. So it's raw. It is what it is. People might feel like should have more safety. I'm like, no, it's Pikes Peak, So, and we're able to, we just couldn't do it. We couldn't have that infrastructure. So it's one of those few places in the world that still set up and still challenges drivers that way. From the altitude, hypoxia is real. People, they run with oxygen. Decision making gets blurry up there for some, and so it's just all the infinite variables are what fascinate me about this race. I can't tell you where the Marmot Crossing is, but I bet you're going to see one somewhere along the line. There's wildlife, weather, course conditions on top of whatever else might be going on in this racer's life. But I think that's what you can expect to see. Many walks of life, many different kinds of people come up here for so many different reasons. And like I said, it's rich storytelling. It's relevant storytelling. It's people overcoming personal and physical challenges in lots of different ways. And we just keep seeing that every year in new and different ways. And I get excited about the field. There's people coming back, and it's the rookies that doing the first time. And watching the staff and our technical and safety teams embrace them and help them meet their goals getting to the summit on race day.
I love it. I will say Pikes Peak is one of my bucket lists that I have not been to yet, and so I need to make that happen. Yeah, 100%. What is something that you're looking forward to most this year?
Oh wow, I think it's so many things. There's going to be a few battles, I think, and it's too early for me to disclose what they're going to be. But what I'm looking forward to is, honestly, again, I still keep coming back to the boring operational things a little bit, but we had some significant changes over the last couple of years, and we don't really have that this year. We're settling into it and just seeing how that feels. And so it keeps, finding out what is our true bandwidth. Now that we've gotten through some big changes, what do we have left inside of us, and what can we keep pushing forward with and on? And, where can we put our future focus on improvement? So, and we're all looking for that. We meet regularly and talk about like what could be better and where. And what's nice is those big things are getting fewer and fewer. But there are those outside challenges, and so it just gives us more bandwidth to get creative to solve those things.
Absolutely. Yeah. There's always something to look forward to. And I love how you said come back to the boring operational, because I love operations like that. I truly, truly loved my role with Road Atlanta at that time, and having to just kind of anticipate and prepare and face, whatever's thrown at you. So I love that so much. You had alluded a couple minutes ago to motorsports having kind of any access and entry point. And I love that you did that, because that's really why this podcast exists, right? No matter what your interest is, there's a way for you to be a part of this industry. What is a piece of advice that you would have for people that are interested in specifically breaking into this industry and coming to work for it?
I think it's just coming with the mindset to keep learning. I think that's how I got to where I am. To be honest, I was 40 when I decided to make the move to motorsports. This is my second career. So I had to make sure that I didn't come in knowing it all. And I think that's just something that everybody, doesn't matter what age you are, you just need to make sure that you're going to learn, because every team does it different. Every series does it different. Every racer does it different. So you just really have to be open-minded and prepare to learn. And then I think one of the biggest vacuums in motorsport is leadership. I think there's huge growth for strong leaders there. So I think, invest in leadership, understand and define what that means to you, and I think that will help you stand out.
That's so important. I appreciate that highlight so much. So as we close out, Melissa, what is the legacy that you really do hope to leave within Pikes Peak and the motorsport world? I mean, you mentioned a few things previously, but really, if you look back at the end of your career, how can you know, I left my mark?
I think for the hill climb, it's, continue that stability, but personally, being recognized for my creativity and leadership and how we got there, and the path and the journey, really, and getting everybody in the organization there. In motorsport, it's reputation. I worked really hard to protect my reputation. It's the choices, it's the things you say no to, it's the things you say yes to. But I find I work really hard to find the right path that is good for everybody involved. A lot of my experience has been in partnerships. So I'm a big believer in sustainable partnerships. It's relationship building. It's not the one-sided arm wrestled package deals that are going to continue you forward. And so, and reputation is, like I said, relationship building, and that really comes with being trustworthy. And so that's really ultimately how I want to be remembered or leave behind or instill in anybody coming up is just, be creative, have empathy, understand marketing objectives, have that background. It doesn't matter who you are, what role you play on a team in an organization or anywhere. You've just really got to know where it all starts, and sometimes that's with the marketing and contracts and the baseline of everything. I keep learning. I keep pushing myself. I keep finding those ways to learn more, and so I think that's all very important. That's who I want to be.
Yeah. As someone in marketing partnerships, I resonate so deeply with so many things you just said. And there's no doubt in my mind that you bring forth and present as authentic and trustworthy. And it's been such a pleasure getting to meet you and interact with you a few times. But where can the listeners follow along and keep up with Pikes Peak and what all you guys are doing?
Well, start with our website, PPIHC.org, and we're on social. We've got some great Instagram, great, car porn happening there. So, I think there, and then all the information to buy tickets, watch the live stream, all that information will be coming out in the next, shortly in the next few months. So, follow us, follow along, and we'll keep improving and building and getting more and more content out there, and let us know what you want to see.
Perfect. And we'll have all of Pikes Peak International Hill Climb information down below so you guys can find it with ease. Melissa, thank you so much for joining and sharing some of your insights and history of the hill climb. And listeners, thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next week. Bye.
All right. Thank you so much.